Aloha, I'm Ray Burgess.
And I'm Mary Silva.
Construction is a booming industry across the nation and particularly here in Hawaii. It's a particularly fast-paced business with great demands and greater rewards.
However, there is danger in building anything. That is, from building single-family homes to multi-story skyscrapers.
Let's start with an overview of some of the most dangerous and prevalent hazards on many construction sites. It is vitally important for workers to understand that working at heights, gravity does not know the difference between a 4-foot fall and a 6-foot fall. Falling from 6 or 60 feet can cause irreparable damage, so workers must make sure they are protected by proper guardrails or a personal fall arrest system. There are also equally serious risks involved with trenching and scaffolding operations. Both of these require specific actions to keep the surroundings safe. We'll get more into the details of how to prevent common hazards related to trenching and scaffolding later in the presentation. Electric shock is a serious hazard that can have deadly consequences if precautions are not taken. Make sure to know where the live lines are and to avoid them if you are not properly trained or qualified to work with electricity. Equally as devastating are accidents which involve heavy machinery. In the world of construction, machines work side by side with people, so make sure you are always aware of their presence and their path. And finally, the use of personal protective equipment as the last line of defense is fundamental to keeping workers safe. PPEs such as hard hats, safety glasses, work boots, hearing protection, or gloves provide individual protection against some of the commonly present dangers like flying debris and dust, sharp edges, chemical contact, and noise. Workers need to understand not just the specifics of what to wear and how to wear it, they need to know why it is so important.
What I want is employees to empower themselves with the opportunity to speak up and say something when they see that there's an incorrect condition out there, unsafe condition that could cause harm to them. Think long term about what the impact is to their family. Because if they're not working, they're not able to feed their family.
A phrase that I like to use is think safety and act safely.
Now let's go into more detail on certain dangers and how to avoid them, starting with fall protection.
Over a 2-year period in Hawaii, more than 7,600 people were reported injured, or worse yet, killed in construction-related accidents. And more than 1,000 of these injuries were caused by falls. In just 1 year, HIOSH cited 173 fall protection-related violations, making this the #1 most cited standard. These numbers represent the seriousness of this hazard, both for employers and employees.
It's no longer cheaper just to take the shortcuts and pay the penalties that are issued through OSHA or HIOSH. It actually saves you money in the long run, especially now when you're required to show what kind of safety records you're having in order to bid a job and be successful in it.
To prevent yourself from becoming one of the injured, make sure to check your ABCDEs of fall arrest. A. Anchorage. This varies with the industry, job, and structure available, but always involves a secure point of attachment capable of holding 5,000 pounds for lifelines, lanyards, or deceleration devices. There are a few areas where an anchor should never be attached. Those are standard guardrails, standard railings, ladders or rungs, scaffolding, light fixtures, conduit or plumbing, ductwork or pipe vents, C-clamps, wiring harness, rebar, of course except for positioning during formwork, another lanyard, roof stacks, vents, or fans. Paying close attention to the anchor point could save someone's life. B, for body support. The full body harness that is worn by the worker. The harness is a device that connects you to the lanyard and anchor point. To function properly, the harness must fit. It should be snug but comfortable. Leg straps that are properly adjusted are often overlooked and in a fall can cause serious secondary injury. The chest strap must be fastened securely and rest across the midline of the chest. The dorsal D-ring must rest between the wearer's shoulder blades. This is critical. If the D-ring falls too far down, the worker could be seriously hurt and suspended in the wrong position after a fall. C. Connectors. These devices join the full body harness to the anchorage point. These can be lanyards, carabiners, or other similar devices that connect the full body harness to the anchor point. Connectors are the critical link in fall protection. Connectors need to be used properly, so make sure you read the manufacturer's instructions and limitations of use. But connectors can get damaged, so workers need to carefully inspect them before use. D. Decelerator. These devices slow a falling worker down and reduce the fall forces to survivable levels. These shock absorbers can be in the form of rope grabs, rip stitch lanyards, self-retracting lifelines, and other similar devices. Remember, these reduce the force of impact on a worker, so they should be worn closest to the body harness. It is also very important that the anchorage point for the connecting and deceleration device be as far above the worker's head as possible. This reduces the distance of the fall. Workers must know how far their deceleration equipment will open and plan proper clearances from the anchor point to the ground to avoid impact. And finally, E. Effective rescue. Although our primary goal is to avoid falls, there must be a plan for prompt, efficient rescue. HIOSH requires that where a worker is exposed to the risk of a fall, a rescue plan must be fully operational prior to the worker being exposed. In-fall rescue time is of the essence. It takes anywhere from 3 to 20 minutes before a suspended worker becomes dizzy, loses consciousness, and is in serious risk of suspension trauma, which can lead to death. A pre-planned emergency response plan can save minutes, which can make the difference between life and death.
As long as your work area is below 6 feet, there is no fall protection required. However, once you go beyond 6 feet, you must provide some means of fall protection, whether it be guardrails or whether you put your man in a fall arrest system.
There has been a dramatic change in how fall protection equipment is viewed and treated on job sites over the past few decades. What used to be virtually ignored is now required and respected as a means of saving lives.
The biggest change that I witnessed when I first started was changing to fall protection, going from the waist body belts to full body harnesses. And that's really helped. There was a lot of resistance to that, just like when they implemented the seatbelt law, but you know, habits are established and then pretty soon you don't really worry about it. It's just second nature.
Another option for fall protection is installing proper guardrails. This is considered a passive fall protection system because workers don't need to think about engaging protection. It is always there. Unlike a personal fall arrest system that has to be actively engaged to an anchor point to work, guardrails are in place, then the workers are free to move about the work area unrestricted. Unlike with the use of a personal fall arrest system, the best choice in controlling hazards is to first eliminate the hazard. If you can do this by installing a guardrail system, then that is the better choice than tying off. Remember, guardrail systems are not to be used as anchor points. They are built to withstand 200 pounds of pressure, not the 5,000 required by an anchor point. Another thing to remember is that guardrails must be installed at 42 inches and mid-rails at half the height of the top rail to the ground. Toe boards are another critical part of a complete guardrail system and must be at least 4 inches in height. Wire rope rails must be tight within 3 inches of downward or outward pressure on the rail and require flagging every 6 feet to aid in visibility. Rails are a passive system, but they require frequent and regular inspection and maintenance to remain effective. Equally as important as meeting the technical safety requirements is instilling a sense of urgency about safety with all personnel on the site. Workers must be aware that the danger of falling exists all the time.
Accidents don't take time off. Accidents are always waiting to happen. So the employee has to understand that he always has to be prepared. If accidents are always waiting to happen, then the employee always has to be prepared to avoid that accident. So it's just that split second where his foot slips or he loses his footing and falls off the roof and becomes, unfortunately, maybe paralyzed from the neck down. And then what good was that few seconds that I was going to take and not do what I was told to do or trained to do or knew that I should do? That excuse really has no meaning at that point because then it's already happened.
Employees are also urged to think beyond just their safety and remember their family, friends, and neighbors when they work at heights. If the worker suffers an injury due to a fall, then the people they care for will suffer along with them.
The community effect it can be 1,000-fold. Basically, if you have an employee that's fallen and is paralyzed, now the family has to put all of their resources into maintaining this individual's new lifestyle until they pass. For example, they have to ensure that he gets prompt medical attention on a daily basis. Then you have to worry about the skyrocketing medical costs that could put an enormous burden on the family, put them through financial dire straits and even lead to bankruptcy. So yeah, there's a big community impact towards an unsafe condition and an accident occurring.
When it comes to working at heights, scaffolding plays an equally important role in construction safety. It needs to be treated with care. Remember, it is a temporary work platform. Scaffolding requires the supervision of a competent person and designed by a qualified person. All personnel working from a scaffold are required to have training so that they are alert to the hazards associated with scaffolding and how to recognize danger. Not all scaffolding is built the same, and not all scaffolding can hold the same loads. There are numerous components that are used to put a scaffold together, and each one of them is critical to the strength and stability of the scaffolding. If you are working on a scaffold, do not assume it is built right. Check before you climb. If you are building a scaffold, remember, people are trusting you to build the scaffold correctly and not to take shortcuts. Their lives depend on it. Here are some things to look for when working around scaffolding. Scaffolding must be sound, rigid, and be sufficient to carry its own weight plus 4 times the maximum intended load without settling or displacement. It must be placed on a suitable surface with base plates, and if settling could occur, mud sills must be used. Use stable objects. Do not use barrels, boxes, loose bricks, or concrete blocks to secure scaffolding. Scaffolding must be equipped with guardrails, mid-rails, and toe boards. Platforms must be fully planked with scaffold-grade planking or the equivalent. Scaffold must not be erected, dismantled, moved, or altered without the supervision of a competent person. Immediately replace scaffold components that are damaged or weakened. Regular inspections must be done before each use and documented by a competent person. Make sure no damage or change has occurred to the scaffolding since its last use. Scaffolding that is 2 feet or more above the ground must be accessed by ladders, stairs, or an adjacent structure within 14 inches. Scaffolding must be at least 10 feet from uninsulated electrical lines. Most importantly, a plan for how the scaffold is to be used, what loads will be applied, and what components are needed is necessary prior to putting up the scaffold to ensure it's done properly and safely. Don't cut corners with scaffolding components. Every part is critical. Preventing an accident with scaffolding or any other element on a job site takes attention to detail. Many times it has to do with your situational awareness and noticing your surroundings. Be aware of everything and you'll be prepared for almost anything.
Well, the construction site is never static. It's such a dynamic environment. The problem is seasoned workers forget, they get so used to doing the same thing over and over that they actually become complacent. Whereas if you get a new worker whose awareness levels are real high, they're more likely to look around and see what the physical changes are on a day-to-day just because they're not sure. And the key to being safe on any job site is never be complacent. Always be aware of not only what you're doing, but what's going on around you by others. You know, we kind of tend to forget what the subcontractor is doing or the guy next to us. Like, oh, I don't have to be worried about any fall hazards because I'm not exposed, I'm not going to be working at heights. Well, you don't realize that the guy coming in after you is coring holes in the floor and maybe just forgot to put that cover on, and then you find yourself going down very quickly.
Just as a worker needs to be aware of his surroundings while working at heights, the same rule applies while on the ground.
It's quite common for employees to be working among heavy equipment and machines, and if not treated properly, the situation can quickly turn dangerous.
And working with heavy equipment, pinch points are when they rotate around. If you're caught in that rotation part, you can get pinched between the wheel or the outriggers, or as it swings around like excavators. Those are pinch points.
Another serious concern with heavy machinery is the struck by hazard category. Knowing where the equipment is at all times and being highly visible to the operator is a must when working around heavy equipment. Always make eye contact with the operator before crossing their path. Never assume they know you are there. Many people have been hurt or killed when walking behind moving equipment or in the operator's blind spot.
He has a focus on a specific job that he's got to do, and he's focused on that job. So anybody operating around him, particularly if they're not in a vehicle, if they're on foot and they're operating in the vicinity of this heavy equipment, they have to be the one who's more aware. They have to make sure that if they're going to get close in the vicinity where he's operating, that they make sure that they see what he's doing and they're aware of what he's doing, and that he sees what they're doing.
If a person on the ground needs to speak with an equipment operator, it is very important that he first signal to the operator and get his attention. Remember to establish eye contact and use clear hand signals so that both people know what is taking place. Never approach equipment until this communication has been established.
You're the one that's being disruptive to what the equipment operator is doing. So it's important that you establish communication, that you see what he's doing, that you avoid where he's going.
Another important point with heavy equipment is proper preventive maintenance. Ensuring equipment is in good working order, that all backup alarms are fully functioning and loud enough for anyone in the vicinity to hear, and making sure that mirrors and windows are not cracked are just a few simple ways to help the operator and pedestrians move safely around one another.
It doesn't take a big machine to cause serious harm. A small device can also cause injury. When working around electrical devices, there are some important guidelines to follow. Make sure all power is turned off when working on new and existing energized electrical circuits. Make sure an effective lockout-tagout system is in place. Promptly replace all frayed, damaged, or worn-out electrical cords. Make sure all extension cords have grounding prong. Protect flexible cords and cables from damage and avoid sharp corners and projection. Use extension cord sets with portable electric tools and appliances that are 3-wire type and designed for hard or extra hard service. Don't bypass any safety system such as a ground fault circuit interrupter or circuit breakers. And finally, make sure all electrical tools and equipment are in safe working condition and are checked regularly. Where there is electricity, there are hazards, particularly around live wires. No matter how powerful you believe the voltage to be, only trained qualified personnel should be around live wires.
You need to know what the definition of a high voltage and low voltage is. 600 volts or greater, that would be considered a high voltage area. 600 and lower, low voltage. Now the requirements for those are different, but basic requirements are it needs to be guarded. No employee should have the potential of contacting, whether by accident or on purpose, contacting the power lines. They have to have proper PPE to enter those areas. And first of all, they need to have the authorization to access those areas. Nothing should be performed with live electrical lines unless they're highly trained and qualified to do that. So if an employee enters a work area and the power lines, the wiring is live or the power lines are live, they shouldn't be in there. And they need to raise their hand and say, I can't work in here because you have live electricity and I don't want to put myself in harm's way.
It is important for construction workers to speak up if they notice a safety violation. Experts want employees on all levels to be aware of hazards and take the initiative to report or correct the hazard, especially with something as dangerous as electricity.
People tend to focus on the high voltage lines. That is really key. Overhead lines, you don't want to get anywhere near. In fact, you don't want to get within 10 feet of a 50,000 volt line. If it goes up higher, well, greater distances. Don't just focus on the high voltage lines. It's a low voltage that'll get you too.
Another tip to handling electrical devices is to utilize GFCIs or ground fault circuit interrupters. These monitor the circuit to make sure what is going out is the same current that's coming back. If there is a difference in the current in the line, the GFCI will detect this difference and trip within 1/40th of a second. This device is there to save people, not equipment. Circuit breakers are in place to save equipment. GFCIs are much quicker and trip at 5 milliamps. This is a critical piece of safety equipment with tools that are not double insulated, as well as in the home.
Now let's discuss the hazards associated with disturbing the natural formation of earth, trenching and excavation.
OSHA considers an excavation to be any man-made depression into the earth. A trench is an excavation that's base is narrower than its depth, but in no case wider than 15 feet at its bottom. The same rules apply to each. One common hazard during excavation and trenching is coming into contact with underground utilities. Commonly found utilities include water, electricity, gas, sewer, and fiber optics. Striking these can be costly to repair as well as extremely dangerous. The state of Hawaii now requires contractors to notify the One Call Center to locate all utilities.
Prior to even beginning an excavation, there are several things that must be done. You must contact your utilities. You must attempt to locate underground utilities, sewer lines, water lines, cable lines prior to even beginning construction. Utility companies are then asked to come out and specifically mark where our excavation, or in this case our trench, will interfere or come in contact with their underground material. This is how we keep a job site safe.
Another type of underground hazard is the movement of the earth itself. OSHA requires a competent person to classify soils and determine the type of protective system that is required for that soil type. All excavations or trenches 5 feet or more in depth require some form of protective system. This can be accomplished through sloping, benching, using shoring or shielding, or having a professional engineer to design a protective system. Any excavation 20 feet or more in depth requires a professional engineer's design to ensure safety. Make sure to keep spoil piles at least 2 feet back from the edge of the excavation and to use ladders anytime you are 4 feet or deeper and every 25 feet of lateral distance. Trenches must be inspected daily by a competent person as conditions such as rain, superimposed loads, water table, and vibration can cause soil to become unstable and fail.
What can happen is cave-ins, falls. You have to make sure that they're after 4 feet shored properly or benched out, depending on what type of soil. And they have to have proper access in and out with a ladder or a step down.
Many of these rules overlap with one another. A good example of this is the 6-foot fall protection rule. This rule applies to trenching as well as walking and working surfaces. Another example is the use of ladders. Ladders used in an excavation must be properly installed and used in the same manner as if they were used in the building. One way to communicate the hazards of a job site is to conduct an employee orientation. This orientation can help new workers to the project be aware of known hazards and avoid accidents from fall, electrical, trenching, and other hazards. A new worker is someone new to the project. This person may be an experienced journeyman, a supervisor, or a new apprentice. If they are new to the project, they need to be informed of the expectations to work safely, what the known and anticipated hazards are, and how to protect themselves. In addition to careful examination by a competent person, there are other ways to keep workers informed, educated, and protected against construction hazards. One of the most important elements is peer accountability and supervision. This means we watch out for one another and speak up when it comes to safety.
All our new hires, they wear green hats for the first 3 months that they work out on our job sites. So that way that shows the other people that they're still new, they're still feeling their way around the work site and don't know where everything is. And they should always have what we call orange hat, which is somebody who's been with us for some time, overseeing them. We never want to see a bunch of new people in one area without some supervision there. That helps make the job site run smoother. It's all about communication and support and pre-planning.
Training is vital when dealing with chemical hazards. Chemicals can be confusing if you don't know where to look for information. Read the labels and the MSDS to ensure all hazards are known. To find out what personal protective equipment should be worn and if OSHA regulates the amount of chemical you can be exposed to. You may need to have additional help with conducting air monitoring to ensure employees are not exposed above the safe dose of the material. Here are some things you should be aware of. Maintain a safety data sheet, or MSDS, for each chemical on the project. Train employees on how to read and use the MSDS and material warning labels. Follow the manufacturer's MSDS instructions for safe handling, storage, and use of chemicals. Train employees about the risk of each chemical. Provide spill cleanup kits and fire extinguishers in areas where chemicals are stored. Have a written spill control plan. Train employees to clean up spills, protect themselves, and properly dispose of used materials. Provide proper personal protective equipment and enforce its use. Store chemicals safely and securely. And perhaps most importantly, make safety information available to employees at all times in a language understood by all personnel. It may seem like there are regulations for everything at a construction site, but there's a reason for every rule. And making sure you go home at night, back to your family and friends, is the #1 reason to prevent accident with chemicals or any other hazard.
It all goes back to helping that employee understand that, these things aren't written, they're not in place to cause you problems, okay, or to disrupt your workday. They're here, they're in place to help provide a safe and helpful workplace for you, the employee, so that that guy can go home, or gal can go home at the end of the day and enjoy his loved ones without missing an arm or a leg or a finger or having any kind of injury that is going to keep him from being able to work and provide a living for his family.
Perhaps not as intimidating as chemical hazards, but ladders are dangerous nonetheless. You are likely to find some type of ladder on nearly every construction site. This simple device is instrumental in any work above reaching distance and is easily overlooked as a legitimate hazard. When working on a ladder, pay close attention to its position on the ground relative to the position in height. Ladders need to be placed at a 4:1 ratio of base to height, or a 75-degree angle to the ground. Failing to properly set up the ladder at this angle can change the center of gravity of the ladder and cause it to slide or tip as a worker climbs up it.
If the ladder is at 8 feet, you must have it extended from the face of the wall a minimum of 2 feet. It's a 4:1 ratio.
Ladders are made for specific types of use and rated to hold a particular maximum load or weight. On the side rail, you'll find a label with information regarding the type of ladder, what it is to be used for, any warnings, and the proper configuration. This label must be visible and is important to read to ensure proper use of the ladder as the manufacturer intended. Furthermore, remember to make sure the ladder is long enough to safely reach the work area and that you have the right type of ladder for the job. Only Type 1 or 1A ladders are permitted in construction. These are rated for 250 and 300 pounds respectively. Mark the words "Do not use" on damaged or defective ladders and immediately remove them from service for repair or replacement. Never load ladders beyond the maximum intended load, and avoid using ladders with metallic components near electrical work and overhead power lines. Make sure ladders are properly secured from displacement and not located in front of doors or other areas where they can be knocked over. It is important to always use the appropriate tool for the job and always double check the tool before each use. It only takes a few seconds and it can make a big difference with safety.
You want to check your equipment every day at the start of the shift. You leave the site, that doesn't necessarily mean that nobody's come over, removed, oh, I need a plank, let me just borrow this. Oh, I'm missing a brace here, let me take this. You know, even though it's well-intentioned, I'm going to put it back. Distractions are so easy.
Finally, every person on the job site needs to wear the proper personal protective equipment. This means every employee should at all times have their eye and face protection, hearing protection, proper footwear and clothing, hard hat, and appropriate gloves. This gear is the last line of defense between a construction worker and the dangers of a job site. It is essential to ensuring your safety. Proper eyewear and hand protection are some of the areas that are often overlooked. It is important to remember that fashion does not rank above function on a construction site.
A pair of Maui Jims or Oakleys, no matter how cool they look, is not going to provide you the impact, resistance, and the safety that you need if something comes flying at your eye. Eye protection has to meet the Z87 ANSI standard.
When working around heavy machinery, the noise can damage hearing. So when the competent person provides workers with proper hearing protection, they should also consider noise sampling to ensure the proper noise reduction rating on the plug or muff to reduce the exposure to acceptable levels. Workers must also be offered a variety of plugs to choose from, as we all have different shaped ear canals and different comfort requirements.
Some people like the ear inserts, the disposable ones that you can roll up and insert into your ear canal. Problem with that in certain cases is in the construction industry, running water and soap is not readily available. You know, you take one of those foam earplugs and you roll it in your dirty hands a few times, it goes from bright yellow to dark brown or black, and that's what you're sticking in there. So hygiene is something to consider when you're talking about ear inserts.
Remember, with hard hats, it's not only the shell on the outside that protects you, it's also the suspension unit on the inside that keeps your head from absorbing the impact. And employers, when you are selecting the proper equipment for the workers, make sure to think long term.
How much personal protective equipment would you be able to buy if one accident occurred and it involved a serious back injury? You know, is it really going to save you that much money now?
Furthermore, safety experts say if employers will make the investment in equipment and take the time to explain their reasoning, they will find themselves with a much safer job site.
I think if a company spends the time to do some orientation with this employee, to make him become aware of what the particular hazards are, to explain to him why he needs to wear certain personal protective equipment, like a good pair of work boots when he's on the job site, and why it's important that he wears hard hat, why it's important that he wear a pair of safety glasses. I think if you take that time, then a lot of hazards that this employee is going to encounter through his day-to-day activities could be avoided. But I also think a lot of that has to do with the attitude of the employee. The employee has to understand that although there are OSHA regulations and there are company policies and procedures that are in place, written, and need to be complied with, that really all of this is for nothing more than his own personal safety. And I think if you can get to an employee and make him understand that, you know, although you may be out there reminding him, hey, you know, you need to be wearing your hard hat, or, you know, that's a pair of sunglasses, not a pair of safety glasses. I think if you take the time to initially explain that to an employee and help him understand why it's important and that it really is for his own safety, that I've found that usually that gets a lot better acceptance from the employee, and I get a lot better compliance.
Personal safety and a clean work environment go hand in hand. It is essential to have both in order to create the safest and most productive workplace possible. So as employers and employees consider the safety measures discussed earlier, they should also bear in mind that proper housekeeping is on the list.
One of the first things a safety officer should look at on a site upon just entering it is it clean? How is the housekeeping being handled? Obviously, this site shows great concern for housekeeping because the rubbish has all been collected and is ready for pickup. There are no foreseeable recognizable fall hazards on this job from tripping or slipping. Just from me walking on this site, I feel confident that they know what they're doing.
Productivity is also increased on a clean and orderly job site because workers don't have to spend precious time searching for the right equipment or looking for a safe walkway. Safety officials encourage a mandatory cleanup by employees before the end of the day, every day.
Despite the long list of regulations, preventing accidents on a work site is worthwhile. One of the most important things to remember is to always be aware of your surroundings and the reasoning behind all the rules, and look up for your co-workers too. Be a team whose goal is to go home safely every night.
If you see somebody else who's not doing something, I always say, watch out for your fellow person. Don't just walk on by, because by walking on by and intentionally not saying anything, you're actually, saying, it's okay. I don't care. And if it happened to you, you would certainly want somebody to be watching out for your safety as well.
Also, don't be afraid to find out more about your specific assignments and the workplace in general. Safety experts encourage managers to interact with all levels in the company, to provide feedback on safety policy and rules, and get involved.